Whatever we know by observation. And I'm not going to hesitate to jump in right now and offer a critique of this. I hope I know we have to go quickly through this material and you may feel blitzed, but either in class or afterwards, stop and reflect on these things. What does this mean? What would you say to somebody who says, everything we know by observation? You might want to say, well, do we know that by observation? Do we know that everything we know is based on observation? Is that an observational truth? And so one of the things you want to get down, remember this because you'll probably be asked on the final if nothing else, but for life, remember this too. Empiricism contradicts itself. There's an inherent contradiction in this denial of innate ideas that says we only know things by observation. Well, if we only know things by observation, then we should be able to observe somehow that we only know things by observation. But of course, that is not something that's available as an observational truth. And why is that? Because of the third distinctive of British empiricism, only particulars exist. If only particulars exist, then I can't know any universal statement by observation, can I? Well, unless I have universal experience. If I've observed every possible thing, then I might say we only know things by observation. I could build it up, increment by increment by increment until it finally fills everything, but no one has that ability. Since you can't build it up incrementally and no one has an experience of a universal, here's a universal. You only know things by observation. So that's a universal truth. But you don't observe any universal truths, so it turns out that empiricism is self-contradictory. But that third distinctive is only particulars exist. See the emphasis on concrete factuality, you see, rather than rational certainty. Only particulars exist. In parentheses, you may want to note this is in the Middle Ages way of putting things known as nominalism. Only particulars exist. And now I'd like to do just a brief critique of that view that only particulars exist. We've already critiqued the notion that you can only know things by observation. There are no innate ideas. Well, if only particulars exist, then are there kinds of things at all? I know this is not the way you usually speak, so I'm going to say it over again. Write in your notes. Do kinds of things exist? This is easy. You go to different kinds of stores, don't you? You go to the hardware store, you can go to the grocery store. Now I realize that the larger grocery stores are trying to encroach upon and will sell some items of hardware. And I've even seen some hardware stores that will have cases of Coke or something, which is more properly a grocery item. But forgetting that overlap, we all know the difference between a grocery store and a hardware store because of the kinds of things that are in them, right? Well, do kinds of things exist? Are similarities between things or classes of things real? Do barns exist? Now that is purposely ambiguous. Do barns exist? From an empirical standpoint, you could say barn 1, barn 2, barn 3 exist. Yeah, barns plural, meaning 1, 2, and 3 brought together. Yeah, they exist. Yeah, but is the very thing you're calling them, barn, does that exist? Is there such a thing as a similarity? Okay. You would be inclined to think, because we generally are very naive philosophically about these abstract questions, you'd say, well, yeah, I look at barn 1, I look at barn 2, I look at barn 3, and now I have an idea of barn, what is common to things that we call barns. But you see, if you're a nominalist, if you're a British empiricist who says only particulars exist, then you don't really have an idea of barn, do you? The idea of barn is not something that you experience. By idea here, I mean the general idea of barrenness. When we get to Berkeley, we'll see this, and then Hume will drive it home with a vengeance. We don't experience anything general. You know? You may go to a hardware store, but no one's ever experienced hardware. Right? You've experienced hammers and nails and saws and, polishing wax for your car and so forth, but you've never experienced hardware. By the way, no one has ever purchased groceries. I know there's an ambiguity in our language to say, well, where were you? Well, I was out buying groceries. Oh, would you please bring me? Don't bring me any particular grocery now. I don't want an apple or a box of cake mix. Bring me groceries. Well, the empiricists would point out, we don't have any general ideas. We don't experience groceryness or hardwareness and so forth. Okay? And I take this as a critique of British empiricism, because if there is no reality to kinds of things, then what are we talking about? We're talking about something that's not real. I'm going to the grocery store. You liar, there is no such thing as grocery. Oh, by the way, there's also no such thing as store. All right? Store is a general kind of thing. So, you're not going to the grocery and you're not going to the store. And by the way, going is a general kind of thing. So you're not going either, because going is unreal. That's just a term. Oh, and guess what? I don't exist either. Because no one experiences identity over time. They only experience momentary sensations. There's no I-ness about it. And so this started out as a polite critique, but you can see the empiricist is getting pretty bruised and bloodied by this now. Because if empiricism is correct, then I can't even speak of anything. I am going to the grocery store every single, may not be, I don't know. But apart from the grammatical helps there, every significant word in that sentence is a kind. I am a kind of individual experiences over time. Going is a kind, it's not a particular. Grocery is not a particular. Store is not a particular. And so when you say only particulars exist, what happens? You make knowledge impossible. If you take that seriously, that only particulars exist, then you can never talk about general things. You can never talk about goings, personal identities. You cannot talk about types of things, grocery versus hardware, or stores, or what have you. If everything is different, if everything is particular and doesn't fit into a kind, into a class, or to use the ancient language, is not part of a universal, if the only thing that's real are the particulars, then you can't know particulars either. And this is going to be the history of British empiricism. Locke will start out trying to be, although I don't agree with his theology altogether, trying to be a good Christian, but trying to be very scientific and get away from the vain speculation of the rationalists and so forth. He's going to set up an epistemology that has its internal problems he doesn't realize. Berkeley will take it another step further. He says, well, if I follow Locke, there's no material substance. The world's made up of experiences, not of an underlying matter behind the experiences. Hume will say, well, but Berkeley, the only thing that kept you from going all the way is that you're trying to be a good Christian. Berkeley, too, is trying to do apologetics. He's trying to show that God exists and the atheists are wrong and so forth. But you see, these guys, Locke and Berkeley, they've got a theory of knowledge that doesn't accord with Christianity. But they, in their heart of hearts, wish to be Christians. They really did. I mean, again, I don't approve of their theology altogether. But Locke wrote apologetical treatises, evidences for Christianity. Berkeley argued for the existence of God against atheism and so forth. He was a bishop in the church and so forth. The only thing that kept them from taking their epistemology to its logical conclusions, that you couldn't know anything was that they were holding on religiously to a certain view of life that really didn't mix in with their theory of knowledge. So what happens when you get a Scottish skeptic like Hume, who despises religion? He finally takes Locke's epistemology, he goes right to the wall with it, and he concludes you can't know anything. You can't know about God, you can't know about science either. As a matter of fact, we can't know anything. Can't even know that there's a self. Can't know that there's an enduring external world. Can't know any causal relationships in this world. And then Hume has all these headaches and goes, oh man, what do I do? All these philosophical problems. He can't answer the philosophical problems, and so he says, I go play backgammon with my friends. Yeah, I don't mind you laughing. It is laughable, but it's also deplorable. Here's a man who his philosophy leads him one way, but he says, I can't live with that, so I'll just stop thinking about it and go out and play a game of checkers or something, you know? So that's my overall view of British empiricism. We have to get down into the forest now and eat a little bark here, get particular about the trees. But I want you to know the three distinctives. Make sure they're in your notes. I want you to be able to critique British empiricism on those 2 points especially. No innate ideas and only particulars exist. And then I want you to be able to explain to me the evolution, if you will, from Locke through Berkeley to the skepticism of Hume. Remember, the only thing that kept Locke and Berkeley from running up against the wall of skepticism that Hume did is that they had a Christian anchor. They were not being good Christian philosophers. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that they personally were not willing to go where their logic would have taken them.